mein Rabanecka, Yama, Madir. Rabanecka, Chinstrappa, Soupstringer, Schnauzbringer, Helmuten, Yama, Madir. Das verteilen und das gut. Boom, boom. Hey guys. Mein Stick. Greetings, program. Still hankering Fernail here, not sure which dot to look at. Greetings, welcome back to Drunkards and Dragons, another cool episode. I'm probably going to be going a million miles an hour because this already happened. And now I'm like making sure that I get it documented for you guys to run at your table because it was a freaking blast. I've been keeping this whole project under wraps for more than a month now because I couldn't have any spoilers for my players at Absolute Tabletop Con, which was this past weekend. But now I got it out of my system. It's over. We did it. It's fun. So since it was fun, it's time to recap. Okay, so you just saw me throw this this table together in super speed, hyper light motion. So now I just want to run you through the adventure. Okay, so there's 3 boards. We're gonna, we'll build them and I'll run through them. And the adventure was called The Children of Azatoth. It also has sort of a subtitle, which is the Viking Death Squad. The reason it has that subtitle is I wanted to make sure the tone of the adventure came through. Children of Azatoth, it's very kind of like, dear Lord, that sounds really serious. But really, it's a sort of a super high action kind of tongue-in-cheek, wacky, kind of a bit of a railroad adventure with these sort of resurrected Vikings in a distant, distant future. The whole thing was inspired by the Black Sabbath song, War Pigs. So I took the couplets from the song, and for each couplet of the lyrics, I tried to put a movement into the adventure. And that's how I built the whole adventure. So you can enjoy that. And when anything cool happens in this adventure, the DM or anyone at the table can go dun 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 dun, etc. Little convention really works. You only have to do it once, and then the players instantly pick up that's like, when somebody does something awesome, they go, dun. So anyway, that's the root of the creative sort of energy that I wanted to bring because it was a convention game. I wasn't sure who all my players were going to be. I knew there were going to be a lot of other games going on, and I kind of just wanted to push the crafting thing over the top, and I just wanted to make something that was fun and didn't have a lot of learning that we could just rip through, that would have epic moments and just call it, instead of try to get into, more emotional subtlety or character subtleties, or, sort of like sublime dilemmas. So anyways, that's the intro. So the way you introduce this adventure when you're running it at your table is you get these 5 characters built. And you can see in the close-ups that I showed that I have 5 minis that I did. I got custom minis just for this adventure. So they are 5 epic Viking warriors from the sort of the era of Charlemagne or the Dark Ages. And all of them knew of each other in those times, but they don't know each other personally. But they're like the greatest of the great heroes of the late Dark Ages, like the 9th century. Dominated everything. They were always the greatest warriors. They were always the smartest scholars. They always healed their own wounds over time and like drew scores of followers, and like they were always epic, epic heroes, but they don't remember the end of their life because they were taken, they don't know this yet, but put into this hypersleep by these entities called the War Pigs. Now, you could give the War Pigs a more gentle name, but I say screw that. This is a heavy metal adventure. This adventure is all about just being as heavy metal as possible. So screw it. They're these dudes called the War Pigs. And they're basically guys in black suits with like metal, like steel or stone stormtrooper helmets that kind of look like this, right? They kind of have this monolithic Chronicles of Riddick look to them. And there's 3 of them that always appear in these shadowy light. And they're sort of like war executives, right? They're like jerks who profit off of war. The adventure begins when you have this layout on your table. Now this adventure is completely reliant. You could run it Theater of the Mind, it would be interesting, but it really does rely on the visual kind of cartooniness. So this is at the table. This section I put on once they open this door. So I'm just have this here for you guys. But you explain to them, suddenly, inextricably, you start to stir out of this black sleep. And this is after they've got their characters all figured out and everybody's ready and they know their names and everything. We have Scar, the Savage, we have Svelda the Warlock, we have Olaf the Chief, we have Vanir the Hero, and we have Arrow Odd the Archer and the Usurper, the Trickster. So this black sleep is suddenly interrupted. Their old creaking joints slowly begin to open. Their eyes are so sticky, they feel like they haven't moved in ages. Ages, I say. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Ages, darn it. Anyway, roll initiative. Whoever wins initiative is the first one to awaken from hypersleep. And they awaken to this weird scene. And if you notice from the crafting, there is some sort of tech involved in the scene, but there's also sort of some fantasy elements. And that's sort of part of the fun. So they wake up, they don't know what's going on, they're on these sort of LED light up hypersleep pods, and inevitably your players will jump out, start looking around, see treasure chests, which are right up here. You can have like 2 to 5 of them depending on how much you want to sort of buff them at the beginning of the adventure. Remember, it's a one shot, so just give them all the loot they want. They always jump down, they go over and they're looking at the chests and they examine it. Then this guy wakes up and Veneer is popping out, and he's like, oh, I remember you from the wars with the Visigoths, and Olaf's down here, and they start, okay, great. So the first element that you're going to play here, there's really only 3 pieces to the entire room. It's super simple. Piece number 1, every DM's turn, everybody saves with dex or takes 1 damage. Insanely simple, but basically it just puts pressure on them. Piece number 2, you've got 3 Vikings in hypersleep pods here, represented by these Pathfinder sort of aberration or horror pawns. And the hypersleep pod has horribly mutated and disfigured them into these ravenous, murderous, mutated, deformed beasts. So they're going to come out and try to kill the Viking death squad, right? Really simple. Don't make them really hard. It's just a little introduction to like, you should get the hell out of here, and here's something to fight. Piece number 3. This door is made out of indestructible material. The only way to open this door is to figure it out. Now, players have a way of inventing ways to do things different ways. So there are little consoles. We've got this cool little piece of tech right here, and then there's this little console over here by the war pig sculpture. And they can investigate these, they can find some runes, they can decode the runes, find the code, or maybe they find, a panel that can be opened, or they're anything except damage. Don't let them smash their way through this door. And it sets a tone on things. So anyways, eventually the door opens up. They have exit from the ship. Now in our con game, this took probably about 8 turns. So for some people that was like 7 damage. And remember, they only have 10 hit points in ICRPG. So already there's this sort of really fun pressure going on. So eventually, right, they get through the door, they start revealing and working their way down this corridor. We had some levitation happen. We had some people kind of helping each other. We had someone left behind. There was some debate whether or not to go down this corridor. As they go down the corridor, things start getting worse and worse. Also, when my timer ran out, my D4 timer, instead of just stumble or take 1 damage, I actually had like these blasts of molten fire, which were artillery shells, but they don't know that term because they're from the Dark Ages. Artillery shells are ripping through this space, like tearing through the floor and shit. Like the whole thing is going to hell. And it keeps like going, just like, we gotta get out of here. They come out the door, they start running down this hallway, and as they do so, the end of the hallway is hit with another shell or another blast of molten fire, and it just tears it completely apart, and this huge rush of wind comes blasting down through here. As that's happening, they're running down, they see this screen. On the screen, and this is critical, this is the part you really got to get right, is a transmission from the War Pigs, a recorded transmission that describes, here's the little screen, and it fits an LED light in the back too, so it'll flicker. And the transmission basically says, and it's like sort of jumbled and it's a little broken and it's off. Also, if you want to throw in a few sort of little humans, which I did, like little peon humans, who are running around going, we're fucked, we're screwed, it's too soon, we shouldn't waken them up. The freeze ray failed, we're doomed. And then like a piece of shrapnel comes and kills one of them and another one's crushed under some debris. It just adds to this kind of what's going on question you want your players to ask. So this transmission basically says,
we are the War Pigs. You are the children of Azatoth. We gave you your power. We have held you for many, many centuries, but now it is time to fulfill your destiny. The freeze rays have failed. The wars have gone on too long. The armies of Lucifer run rampant across the earth. You must find a way to chain him.
We are the war pigs. We have made you what you are. You see, so it just loops like that. And they're these really intimidating, shadowy looking, kind of evil characters, but they're sort of your makers or your generals. Anyway, just as they're taking in this transmission, and you see it in the players, they start looking at each other like, we're supposed to go fight Lucifer? Like what? And then this wind gets worse and worse, and inevitably one character is going to look down this little channel right here, and you can see this sort of destroyed walls. You're going to look down this channel, and when they do, they see stars. And then they look downward, and they see the earth. And they are above the earth, miles above the earth. The whole thing starts tearing apart. The wind gets so bad, inevitably somebody's going to fail a strength roll to hold on, and will get sucked out. When they do, at first they're like, okay, well, I guess I'm dead. But instead, they get sucked out, and as they enter the earth's atmosphere, instead of burning up with fire, they ignite with this rainbow light, the Bifrost light, the great rainbow bridge of the Vikings. And they descend into this nosedive at hyper speed, going into the Bifrost. Remember from Thor, how it's like, with all these rainbow colors. And as they do so, heal all their damage and give them another, in ICRPG's case, give them another heart, give them another 10 hit points. Just because they're realizing their old power. So all the players see this happen, and they'll instantly be like, I jump, and they do it with different styles. You know, some people swan dive, some people cannonball. They go out and they get to dive down through orbit. And as they do, they look back and they see this colossal ship, which I call a war hulk. And it is massive. It's like an eighth of the size of the moon. Like, this thing is giant. And there are 12 of them in orbit, and they're all these giant, like, coffin-shaped ships. And it looks like they were in like a parallel formation, but the artillery shots coming up from the earth are tearing up the formation. One of them's like broken in half. The whole formation is breaking, and they're all starting to descend toward earth as the Viking death squad are nosediving down from orbit towards the earth. Dun, 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 dun. See how that whole intro section is heavy metal as all get out. It's very heavy metal. Now, we just went through it in, 2 minutes? So we went through it in hyperspeed time. At our table, that was 1 hour of gameplay. To wake up, fight the guys, get shook around, look around, see, whoa, we're in some kind of weird ship. Some little peon crewmen are killed. Figure out the door, get sucked out as the front of the ship is torn apart. Hear the transmission, which the key message here is you work for the war pigs, and you have to go stop Satan himself before he takes over the entire earth, and then get sucked out, nosedive, badass style, down to the earth, Bifrost, power up, pow. So you want to take them from, we're fantasy characters, but we're like in a sort of a weird, like, Chronicles of Riddick spaceship. Remember, it's not just a normal spaceship, it's kind of gothy. So we woke up in a spaceship, and now we're plummeting toward Earth from orbit, and like, holy crap. And one last clue you can give is as they're plummeting down toward the Earth, they notice that the Earth is like entirely covered in snow. And remember, there's a little brief mention, either through your peons who die or through your transmission, that like the freeze ray failed or the freeze attacks have failed. So anyways, that's it. That's the first room. Now let's move ahead, and in hyperspeed we will build the next scene, which is Earth itself, which is frozen over, where they're going to try to survive for the next round, okay? Come down through this sort of nosedive through space, right? And all 5 of them land right here together. Maybe you take the person who jumped first, and they kind of are just outside the crater when everyone gets down here. But you've got this ice crater, and they all just will barely fit in this ice crater, right? So they go Bifrost style, and they all land here in the ice. And right away there's this snow and wind blowing everywhere, and, you know, classic way to get your room DC up a few notches. And the ground is slippery, and the whole place is encased in ice. So it isn't just snow and ice on rocks. Like, there's huge chunks of technology that are frozen inside these masses of ice. Like, what the hell? By now, someone may have asked like what year it is. If they do, for my game, I was referring it to it as the year 3066. So it's 2,000 years after the Battle of Hastings. Just to be, right? So for 1,000 or more years, this war has been going on, and these freeze attacks have frozen the entire Earth. And now we're going to meet the sort of other faction. Now remember, their mission is to go and to chain Lucifer himself, right? So presumably, Satan himself is battling the war pigs. Now in my story, and my players weren't really hungry for political intrigue. They just were like single-minded. They were just going like attack and kill. But if you have a lot of questions coming up, the sort of the whole truth, as I like to call it, is that Satan has always been a friend of man, right? He's like a fan of man, to quote Robert De Niro. But this other faction, this is the human faction. They are Satan's army. And they have this sort of different looking technology, and they are prowling the world and trying to beat the war pigs. So if you keep that in mind, in a way, the heroes are kind of the bad guys against humanity, but since they're against Lucifer, that kind of makes them the good guys. And there's a million ways as a cool DM that you can kind of spin this dilemma and make it unclear who the good guys are. In this case, they're going to fight human beings, and it might make them feel a little weird. But sometimes with a lot of players, if they're fired upon, that means they're bad guys. But with the first playtest I did of this game, they definitely were feeling the moral dilemma of it. So anyways, what happens here? They land, they're on a big ice board, they come out, and remember, I show you everything as it's already fully built, so they won't be able to see these tanks at first. But they come out, they start doing their thing, making perception checks, what's going on. You roll a timer, the timer runs out, and so you spawn the hover tank, which is this big sucker right here, right? So the hover tank is the sort of main threat here. Then you have these little tanks that also then arrive to escalate things. And I forgot one little piece, the ice poop. Give me that. It's in this little thing. Okay. So these are little Pathfinder pawns of like little yellow jellies. So they come out of each of these 4 pieces of wreckage. What is this? I picked up some random object. So in the first game that I played, the heroes were really aggressive and were doing a ton of damage. So the little ice jellies came out, and when they have really low movement speed, and when they reached the hover tank, they gave it hit points. In the game that we were playing at the convention, the players were not dishing out nearly as much damage, and so I had the ice jellies, which are kind of like little blobs of oil. They would come out, and if they touched a player, they would encase them in ice, right? So if Svelda's out here and she encounters one of these ice jellies, it would disappear, and then I put my little ice encasing on her. So it's just a form of sort of, player crowd control. So these guys are moving out, they're fighting. These things are like basically unbeatable. They're firing like missile volleys and stuff, and they have laser cannons. It's crazy. I didn't really expect it to happen, but in the con game, they jumped up on here and opened a hatch and found human pilots in there who were sort of infernally influenced, like glowing red eyes, but human beings. And they yanked them out of the cockpit and sort of disabled the hover tank that way. Somebody inevitably is going to go investigate this and like, whoa, here's your final piece to this room. This is really a pretty simple room, and it should happen fast. These tanks should be almost unbeatable. The basic message here is get the hell out. It's just a transition. And in the con, I think this room took us about 40 minutes. So you come up, and this is the real crux of the room right here. It's this enterable pod, almost like a giant phone booth or something, with this sort of infernal symbol on it. And behind it, there's a massive beam being generated right here. And the beam is pulsing downward. And when someone reaches this edge, they realize this isn't just a figurative edge of a board. This is actually a drop-off down into the center of the earth. And this beam that's being generated is pulsing straight downward, down into the center of the earth. And if they look down there, which is always happens, it's way the hell down on all this orange gas, and you can see this sort of black rock core in the center of the earth. And that, my friends, is hell. And this beam is transporting matter down into hell. So to test the transport beam in the con game, we had one Viking go up and just hit it with his axe, which, that's how Vikings do things. And the little piece of the blade of the axe broke and floated into the beam, or into the little transport area here. And like it was disintegrated, like Tron style, sucked up into the beam, and then there's a blob in the beam and it goes shooting downward. And they instantly understood. They're like, oh crap. Then they didn't really know if they wanted to use it, but then the tanks close in. And when the tanks close in, you just got to get the hell out of here. Make the tanks unbeatable. If you kill a player here, it's okay. You could punt them out of the game to be sort of uncreative. But another way to do it is, you know, the children of Azatoth, when they die, actually they just lose all their gear. They're -1 to all their stats, but they live on in this sort of shriveled form. Maybe with 2 hit points for the rest of the adventure. Got up to the beam and shot down. So it's really simple. But really what you're saying with this room is there's a whole war going on the surface of the world, and it's this frozen world covered in tanks. And that's really the image that you want to get into the player's mind. So they came from orbit. They find out that the whole world is like a frozen battleground, and they're fighting humans, which is probably not a good feeling. I mean, you generally don't want to just be killing humans when you're like a big hero. But, you know, if they attack you with tanks, what has to be done has to be done. And then they take this beam downward. Now, when they take the deep beam downward is when we get to the best part. The beam works on infernal energy, and it's going to mutate all 5 players slightly with infernal power. And you're going to have them do a little routine I call drawing straws. Drawing straws is where everyone rolls a d20. The lowest roll is the short straw. That's the worst outcome. The highest roll is the long straw, or the best outcome. Then I just have a little chart in my my book for the module design, which describes the effect of these 5 straw lengths, these 5 rolls. The very best of them gains some hit points and gains some demonic power, like a big powerful melee attack. Then you move down, another guy gets giant teeth, and now he has this super strong bite attack that actually helps him regenerate. Then you move down, another guy gets limited flight ability. He gets little shriveled wings. The next guy, his weapon lights on fire. The worst of them, the lowest roll, you don't reveal what happens to them. You don't reveal what happens to them. So when they land on the final board, whoever rolled the lowest roll, have them take their mini and keep it by them, because they're not going to be visible at first, okay? And then we'll reveal what happens in the final board. So there you go. That's the second board. That's the sort of frozen battlefield. The fields of bodies burning as the war machine keeps turning. So that's that. So you just transitioned them and you sucked them straight down to the core of the earth. And, you know, maybe they mutz around, they destroy this, it falls, maybe they plummet downward. Anything can happen. But they'll want to go down there because, remember, they are gunning for Lucifer. So that's going to be our next board. So let's go into magic time and get that done. Okay, so we're at the third board now, and remember they just zipped down on the transport beam from the frozen surface, being infernally corrupted and mutated as they went down through the beam. This is going to give them some power if they get into a final battle, but it's also going to be cool because they get to write things on their sheet. Now remember, only 4 of the 5 children of Azatoth appear right here in the landing crater in the final board. Okay, so as cool as this tree is, because, you know, Satan likes his roses. It's just like right in my nose. Anyway, one of them is missing. So they're like, well, what happened? Maybe he died in the beam or something. No, that player is still at the board. So what you've told in the meantime is that they have turned into Lucifer himself. But where is it? Here we go. As you reveal this to your players, that the transport beam has actually transformed one of them into Lucifer himself. So this is my sculpt of the Prince of Darkness right here, and he's up on his altar. You have these. So whichever player becomes Lucifer, pop those on there, and then you let them role play the Prince of Darkness. Now, this is the end of the adventure. Here's their mini. And you have just only a few things, once again, at play. The most important one is that the Warhulks, remember those giant coffin-shaped ships that were in orbit, the ships of the war pigs, they are being destroyed and knocked out of orbit and crashing down into the earth. And if you look up, way above you, up in the orange clouds, way up, you can see them beginning to descend. And don't roll your timer yet, but you'll know when this moment, it may be a battle, it may be a role-playing encounter, it could be anything. When it reaches a sort of a crescendo, roll your session end dice. So that's a 1d6, throwing out a 1. And in that many turns, 2 to 4 turns usually, those Warhulks are going to come crashing down and destroy hell and probably Earth with it. The whole planet will probably be cracked in half. Everyone here will be totally annihilated. So the fascinating thing about this encounter is not what the outcome will be. And let them know that right off the bat. The outcome is already fixed. They will all be destroyed. The only question is, what are they going to do? How will they face this sort of no-win scenario? Especially when they realize that their friend Scar, the Savage, has become Lucifer himself. They can see in Satan's mannerisms that Scar is inside there. I've ran this adventure twice, and the results of the role-playing of Satan could not have been more different. So the first time we ran it, the character who wound up being Lucifer was like making these sort of speeches and these kind of sublime statements about, join me and like everlasting life will be yours, or you could die here. He says the war, another one was like, the war can go on forever. This is perfect for me. I love this. He also was pointing out that the war pigs are the actual villains. That Lucifer is the fan of mankind, the savior of mankind. It's the war pigs that want to wipe mankind out. And that's who you want to work for. And it was great because the player playing Satan, my buddy Bob McHenry, was posing these dilemmas to the other players. Do you want to live on with me forever and fight these war pigs who actually imprisoned you for millennia? Or do you want to do their dirty work and come down here and pretend to defeat me? You think this is my only body? Like, I'll live on no matter what you do. And it's this great situation, okay, as the Warhulks are descending to end the game. Now, on the other hand, this could be a battle. They could say, screw you, in your face, right? And they begin charging forward, right? These are Vikings. They are a death squad. So what do they care? Grabbing some loot, whatever. And then I had a lot of possible mechanics that I wanted to play, but I was going to see what players did. So the possible mechanics are, Lucifer can't be hurt until these 2 torches are snuffed out. These are like the torches of his soul. Another one is that this spear here, this is actually the spear of Longinus, the super legendary spear of like Gabriel or something. Like it's an epic weapon. Or maybe it's just set dressing. It's up to players to use their imaginations here. Then you also have the mirror. So if you guys know that movie, The Prince of Darkness, actually Satan's sort of father, like the anti-god, kind of lives inside this mirror. And if he can ever come through it, then the whole, not only the world, but the universe will turn dark and stuff. So maybe that's a mechanic. Maybe he's protecting the mirror. Maybe they can shatter the mirror to suck him in. Maybe they can hurl him into the mirror. Maybe the spear can shatter the mirror. Maybe the fires can melt maybe this thing can, the transport beam can be, I don't know, here's some loot. When I hand the role of Lucifer over to one of the players, I actually tell them, you can do basically anything you can describe. Lucifer is almost all-powerful. So I make him, like a 50 hit point. In ICRPG, he's like a 50 hit point monster. If you're playing D&D, probably more like 100. If you're playing Pathfinder, probably more like 200. So that's about where I'm at as far as his combat. But as far as what he can do, if you can describe it, Lucifer can do it. So I've had him turn these loot crates into undead Viking death squad characters. He brought down a ray of like infernal energy that he bounced off the mirror and fried one of the Vikings. He actually took one of the Vikings' new abilities, which was fire breath, and used it against him and blew him to cinders. That was at the convention. We actually had a death right here at the end of the game, and it was awesome. But, they can battle him. They can, stab him with the spear and all kinds of things. He can use charisma to drive them all away with fear. There's a million things that can happen, and you don't have to plan those things. Let the players invent this encounter. And I think that's the real thesis that I want to get across here, and why it's really fun at a convention, is that you're saying a convention for role-playing is not just a place where you're in awe of the DM. It's just like Adam Koebel was talking about a little ways back, about to pretend that the DM is somehow a higher elevation than a player is to miss the joy of the RPG. The players are just as much the creator as the DM. And in this particular case, I designed this encounter to, highly emphasize that fact. The players can invent and drive this in whatever direction they can conceive of. And as the DM, since there's no outcome, the only outcome is death for all, you can take it to 11. You also know that if somebody is completely blown apart or killed right now, they only have, 15 minutes to sit and watch the game play out and root their friends on. And in that time, we kept, at the convention, it was great, we kept, at ATCON, kept mentioning how Dave's character, Vanir, not just you're dead, but how he was ascending to Valhalla as the battle was finishing. And these characters, being really awesome players, they were also saying, like, we don't need Satan's gift of immortality. We will join our friends soon at the feast. And like, oh my God, it's like sending shivers down my spine as we're finishing this encounter. So let it be whatever it is. Also, if you want to, instead of killing Satan, maybe you do him enough hit points, it knocks the poor soul out of him to rejoin the battle, and Satan kind of opens his own eyes. Then poop, you take the horns off the player that was playing Lucifer and put him back on your DM head, right? And take over Satan, and then you can really unleash his power because you don't have that maybe hesitation that a player would have to attack his own brothers. And you can do a couple speeches real quick to really lock down the end of the encounter. But that's it. Mechanically and design-wise, it's insanely simple, but socially and creatively and storytelling, this gives everyone lots of familiar yet highly heroic and epic pieces to move in a storytell. Now, as the Warhulks descend, they're right here, this black steel masses about to crush the earth. Give each player their sort of final moment, their freeze frame. How they'll be told of in legends if anyone survives on the earth. And when you frame it that way, each person will meet their end with this kind of immortal dignity. This I will be remembered this way. In our con game, actually, our caster finally got her dice to behave and delivered massive damage to Lucifer at the end, blasted him backward into the mirror, and then they used the spear to shatter the mirror to trap him there forever. And they sort of saw his shadowy face receding into the smoke inside the mirror. It was epic. And then the Warhulks hit and killed them all, and they all feasted with the gods that night. Oh. Anyway, that's it. So now you can play it at your table. You could do it with dry erase, but I do think the visual part is kind of part of the fun of the game. If you just get all your wording down pat, you could totally do it Theater of the Mind too. It's a really fun one-nighter that takes everything way over the top. And just come into this with a ton of energy. Come into this knowing that this is the biggest story. It's ridiculous. It's completely flying out of proportion. If lots of numerics are going to help you do that, like big, complex, highly powered characters, then fine. If you like simple characters that move fast like I do it that way. Either way, the key to the ending of the game is to under-design this encounter. Let the players visualize, create, and describe all the crazy possibility and dilemma and conversation that can happen here. And just let them invent it. And just have your guidelines. You can work within your guidelines to accommodate them. And if you don't know what kind of call to make as far as a rule or a mechanic or a numeric, discuss it with them. Openly just say, I'm not sure, what do you guys think about, every time Satan does damage, it's ultimate. To use ICRPG terms, and that's what we did. And it was very simple, very deadly. The spike damage was just nuts on him, but he also had a chance of rolling low. You had a chance. So it worked out fantastically. I gotta thank my players from ATCON who busted this room wide open and did so great. The whole adventure was really fun. We did it in just about exactly 3 hours. That was Mike and his son Kyle, who played Scar the Savage and who played Lucifer. And then we had Tomiko, who played Arrow Odd, the Archer and Trickster. Then we had Nate Vanderzee from WasD20, who played Olaf the Elder and did a lot of like, what do you think we should do kind of voice acting. We had Dave Hubble, who played Vanir the Hero and also did some great voice acting in there. What shall we do? And then finally we had Carol, who played the Warlock, and she rolled low so many times, but then finally at the very end of the adventure, her dice just lit up and boom, she just did her thing, and it was totally awesome. So thanks you guys for playing in my game, in your game, and making it fun for me and everyone there at the table. It was an absolute blast. Now you guys can rock this at your table, maybe turn it into more, but it's really designed to be a one-shot because of the shave and a haircut kind of aspect of it, which is, if you're not familiar with that phrase, it means like, that's shave and a haircut. Like, this ends. This is the end. Now, if they get attached to these characters because the minis are cool or because they like the team vibe or something, you can have them sort of go back in time, back to their heroic days, or maybe they cloned more than one of these during hypersleep or whatever. You can come up with all kinds of crazy heavy metal explanations. But there you go. That is the Children of Azatoth, the Viking Death Squad. Strength, honor, beer. And we are moving forward. I am so happy to have this out of my system. This was a huge creative endeavor that I've been working on. Not only all the crafting, but to get the notes just down pat, and wrote the notes again and again. I'll post photos from my journal now that I don't have to hide them. To make sure that I could just run this off the top of my head and focus on my players at a con, which is a pretty wild environment to be running a game. So roll that beautiful bean for it. And I'll see you next time, guys. Hank and Fernail signing off. Dun, 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 dun.